Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for another Fringe Talkback. My name is Kate Coley, and I'm the Talkback producer for the 2020 Cincy Fringe. I'm very excited to be back with another live streamed Talkback. All the other ones are archived on our website, cincyfringe.com, and on Facebook. And today I am here with the team that brought us the Fringe flashback knife slinging. So if you could all introduce yourselves, and then we'll have a brief statement, and then we'll go ahead and get started with some questions.
Hi, everyone. I'm Moats. It rhymes with boats. I'm the producer, playwright, and performer that played Ted Critter Montana from Knife Slinging.
Thanks.
I don't know what order we're going in. Sorry. My
Go ahead.
name is Grant Knutson, and for this show, I was the videographer.
Great. Thank you.
I was just trying to be respectful and let all the men speak before I opened my mouth,
Oh, boy.
because that's my personal brand. Hi, I'm Liz. Most of you probably.
Oh, she froze a little bit.
Did I freeze again?
Yes, just a little bit.
Darn.
But we got that you're Liz. Oh, look, she's frozen. All right, why don't we go ahead and, Moats, if you want to share your statement before we get started with some questions.
Sure thing. Hi, everybody. I've lived in the Twin Cities for nearly 14 years now. It's my adopted home. I fully support the protests and community outreach that is taking place here in response to overwhelming police violence against Black lives. This play, Knife Slinging, was written in 2017, which feels like a million years ago. I finished the first draft on the same day Geronimo Yanez, the police officer who murdered Philando Castile, a 32-year-old Black man, was found innocent of all charges. And suddenly it doesn't feel all that long ago. And it's clear that a change is needed. This play does not deal with police violence outright, but very much touches on the dangerous concept of othering, or viewing or treating people that have a different color of their skin than you, treating them differently. I've certainly been guilty of that in my life and will probably be guilty of it again. And I was hesitant to recognize that, but I hope to do better. In fact, I use a stupid writer trick in this show where I set the crime at the center of the trial on East Lake Street, knowing that that would be a shorthand for my audience to know what sort of crime I was talking about without having to go into detail. It's lazy and it's privileged, and I regret it. East Lake Street was the location of the largest confrontations with the Minneapolis police, where the 3rd Precinct building was burned. So that's the neighborhood at the center of the protests, at the center of the larger movement going on across our country and now across the world. People here are still protesting, and the police are still escalating violence rather than diffusing. I know similar things are happening even in Cincinnati right now. And although I've only been to your city once, I just as strongly support the protesters in your city as my own. I'll be donating my profits from the festival to the Due Nord Riot Recovery Fund, a Black-owned distillery that established a fund to support Black and brown companies affected by the riots. Kate has a list of other organizations accepting donations at the time if you feel so obligated. And I know there's probably organizations in your own communities that you can look to as well.
And we'll post that in the comments on the Facebook live stream.
Thank you. Just to conclude, Black Lives Matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing that, Moats, and for contextualizing a little bit more about the show and about your, personal connection to these ideas of violence and entitlement that leads to violence. I really appreciate that, so thank you, and we'll be sharing those resources as well. So my first question that I have specifically about this show is a little bit about your company, which is Paper Soul. And the goal of Paper Soul is to experiment with the misconceptions and expectations of solo performance. So I would love to know how you see knife slinging playing into that mission, and what you learned from that as it relates to the mission of Paper Soul.
Absolutely. For the longest time, I only knew of like 2 sorts of solo performance, and that was the type where there was one actor who played multiple characters, with different postures and voices and costumes and things like that, or the sort of memoir solo show where a person would come out and talk about their life and sometimes play different characters using voices and postures and whatnot. And I never really thought of it as it could be a play that usually has multiple people, but it just happens to have one person in it. And then that's where a lot of my earlier shows were dealing with that kind of
Mm-hmm.
experiment, how to just have a play with just one character. Not typically myself, I play someone different. And by the time we got to this show, I was looking to see how could I experiment having a solo show with two people in it.
Right.
Yeah. And so the concept or the conceit of this show is that the second person is always played by a different actor
Mm-hmm.
in each performance, reading the
Oh.
script from a music stand.
Mm-hmm.
And typically we do it without any sort of rehearsal or preparation. So to me, that makes it still feel like a solo show, that I'm constant throughout each performance, but the lawyer, the prosecutor, is always a different person.
Right.
And I feel like that sticks with our mission pretty well, and it feels very fringy at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is you work on solo art, but this is sort of a two-hander. And so the recording that we all saw, if you're watching this year, Liz, you were the other character. So
Yeah, I
what was
was.
that? Yeah, what was it like jumping in, being very much in a play and also very much on book? What was that experience like?
Terrifying, but in that really like adrenaline high kind of way.
Yeah.
It was so first of all, I did not know Moats at all going into this.
Oh my
We
god.
were hooked up through a friend who was like, hey, I have a friend who's it was Sadie Bowman, by the way, of many fringes before. And she was like, I have this guy who needs a person. Can you be a person? And I was like, debatable. But then yeah, it was just, it felt very raw, but very sort of, like I'm an actor. And so there was a lot of listening and
Yeah.
just working with what I was given. And the only thing that was, I think, different was that it was totally fresh. I didn't have any of the expectations from previous performances. It was just totally real and in the moment.
That is very cool. Thank you for sharing that. And Grant, how did you come onto the project as videographer?
Well, I travel all over North America to go to Fringe festivals and meet artists and help artists learn about the festivals. And one of the ways that I help festivals out and help artists out when I do that is to offer footage for things. So honestly, Moats and I had only met online as well. I do a monthly list of which Fringe festivals currently have their applications open, not the last few months because the world is weird right now. But we had only met through that, and Liz and I only met at the festival last year, though I know Sadie and a whole bunch of other people who've done the festival there. So I was mainly there to learn about Cincy Fringe more directly,
Very cool.
and just happened to offer to the different people whose shows I was seeing to get footage. Had we known it was going to become a presentation the next year, we would have used the external mic, played with lights a little bit. Though I'm very glad that it exists. I'm glad we got the secondary actor that we did. And I don't know if you remember this, Moats, but the audience participation that night happened to be my wife. Heather.
That's right. Yeah.
So she happened to be in there as well. We're more involved than we thought. But mainly this was just part of my way of helping out artists as I travel, and it ended up being useful in a whole different way, which is wonderful.
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't know that before, so that's really great. That I'm glad that we got to have that footage in order to have a Fringe flashback. So anyone who saw this footage is seeing a show that was a year ago live. And so I would love to know a little bit from each of you of like, what have you been up to in the last year? What have you been working on? Yeah. Since last Fringe.
Well, I was slated to come to Cincy Fringe before it turned digital with another show of mine called Soft, which is a horror show, and very much, again, deals with the same, I'm consistent solo performer throughout, and there will be a different person reading a robotic voice. Kind of makes me do things to myself. it's a horror show. Use your imagination. Hopefully, I can bring that to whenever the festival is back live. It's nothing that it's not a show I think would work very well digitally. It needs to be like experienced. So I created that for the 2018 Minnesota Fringe, a year after Night Slingin'. And I was working on a sort of sequel show to that to go to the Minnesota Fringe for this year before everything happened. So currently I'm trying to focus on breathing in and out and getting up out of bed every day and trying to figure out how I can help all those around me. The Minnesota Fringe is now going digital as well. So I'm trying to find if there's something I can do to, as an artist, provide to that. But otherwise, yeah.
Great, yeah. A little bit of shows, a little bit of staying afloat. Great. Well, I hope that we get to see something with the other Fringe Festival going digital. That sounds great. Liz, do you want to talk a little bit about, what your year between Fringes has been like?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if you follow Cincy Fringe or the No Theater on social media, or if you get our newsletters, you see what I'm up to, because my day job is creating all that stuff. I also, I do some stage managing, I do some acting. Our education director, Maggie Lou Rader, wrote a really beautiful play about women who disguise themselves as men to fight in the Civil War. So I got to be in the world premiere of that in this past year. I played a Civil War nurse. So yeah, good times.
Very awesome. And what about you, Grant?
Well, I hit 2 more festivals last year on the same road trip that I went to Cincy, and then about 3 more through the year. And I actually managed to hit 3 festivals before everything shut down this year, which is great. Again, my job mainly, I try to go learn about the fest as much as possible so that I can tell people about them. Now, without all of that going on, like I said, the footage was a backup thing. It was an extra. It was a way to help people out when I was asking them for way too much information and to introduce me to people and tell me about your fest. And here, I can give you something.
Yeah.
But from doing that over 3 years, I now have about 5 terabytes worth of variety show data from over here and Fringe shows. And so for the last few months, I've been either sitting at home snuggling with cats or sitting at home going through footage and helping artists pull things from that to get possible online content. So it ended up becoming something to do with this downtime.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very lucky turn. We actually have an audience question that I think is going to let us dig a little bit more into the show itself. This is from Ricky and Dana, who are faithful Talkback watchers and always ask me great questions. Ricky and Dana want to know, Moats, is it hard to remember cues when you have a different lawyer to play against every time?
Oh, wow. Great question. I was actually really worried about that, doing this kind of concept, knowing that, every actor is different in how they do pauses or inflections or things like that. And I actually found it to be more of a challenge for myself as an actor to really pay attention to the person I'm on stage with. And honestly, the character of Critter is something that it's really fun to embody. And he's the way he can react to things, I find a lot of joy in and playing with that. So it's always been fun to, I wouldn't say difficult though. I don't think it's ever been difficult. Even when there's been some times when some actors have missed a cue or like forgotten to come back on stage or lost their place in the script, I feel like the show is loosey-goosey enough where I can just kind of in character walk across stage and go page 12 and point to them. And they pick it right up, and then the audience laughs, and we're back in the show. And I think it's been fine. I take it as a wonderful challenge, not taking myself seriously, but just loving that I can work with so many great different actors and learn from them as well.
Very cool. Yeah. Could you talk a little bit
Let me be
about?
clear, I've never
Oh yeah.
made a mistake, right? Like all these things that other actors have done.
That was
I was without
hypothetical.
flaws, right?
Of course. Liz was flawless in every way.
And that's why we have the footage with Liz.
Of course.
Obviously. Yes. Moats, could you talk a little bit about the development of Critter as a character? He seems really familiar if you watch things like Duck Dynasty or something, you know? That sort of genre of reality TV or, you know, internet personality. So I'd love to know a little bit about what some of your inspirations are for this character, and how he came about in the way that he did.
He's very much based on a real person named Mark the Animal McYoung, who had a series of self-defense books and videos, much like Critter, back in the late 80s, early 90s. And he's quite the character. A lot of the visual stuff I have, this Critter, is from him. Not everything, but it's very much based on him. And the way he phrases things is very, very funny. And he sees himself as like a philosopher, but at the same time, he sees the streets as a war zone. And the only way you'll ever be safe is if you have a knife. And it's just very strange. I worked at a bookstore for many years, and one of his books, it was called Knives, Knife Fighting, and Related Hassles. Came into the store, and I've had that book for so long, and I haven't read it cover to cover, but it's one of those I just flip through it and go, oh my gosh, he thinks this is real. But it's also like that same kind of vein of toxic macho-ness that if I ever get to scrape, I can do it. And I'm like, who cares, man? Yeah.
Yeah,
that was the main.
What was the name one more time, so I can do my own research?
Mark the Animal McYoung. I think he's dropped the animal part now, since it's been several years. And it's Mark with a C. And actually, these days, much like Critter, which was actually another impetus to do the show, is he's spending a lot of his time trying to denounce violence. With children. He's trying to teach kids not to take things like martial arts. He's like, that's going to put you in a violent mindset as opposed to trying to defuse a situation. And I'm like, well, that's actually kind of admirable. So,
wow.
I'm not saying he's a saint, and I'm not saying he's a role model, but there are things about him I find fascinating. The character I wanted to kind of focus writing a play about.
Right. That is super interesting. And knowing, like, in fact, this person is now a pacifist, or something was a persona that's, you know, or encourages de-escalation. Yes. Maybe we won't go full pacifist. But I think that's really interesting, and seeing that development, I think really gives Critter and the animal a lot more dimension to something that we might just sort of stereotype and write off in one way. So it's very interesting.
And if anyone's concerned, I have reached out to him to let him know that I've written this show, that I'm not trying to like rip off his thing. I've never heard that, but I have reached out to him.
That is permission enough. With our last couple of minutes, I would love to know how we can support each of you and your work moving forward. If there are websites where we can find what you do, if you have video we should watch, anything like that where we can help support you ongoing.
Hey, Grant, why don't you go first?
Sure. I have a website and especially Facebook page called Minion Productions, with this fun blue robot on there. You can find it. When the world opens back up for all of us festival types, I will continue having information, interviews with people from festivals, and the lists of festivals you could apply to. Until then, I'm just hoping to help more people get footage online.
Great, thank you. Liz, do you want to go next?
Oh, yeah, sure. I am terrible at self-promotion, so I don't have a website or anything. But everything that people do to support the Know and to support Fringe keeps me employed. So thank you all for being here. It means the world that I can keep my dog in dog food.
Well, I do have a website for Paper Soul. It's papersoul.org. I don't think I've touched it in a while since the whole everything shut down. So it's probably pretty outdated, but I should get on there if need be. It also has links to my, I have a handful of work on New Play Exchange. Everything is under just moats on New Play Exchange. And if people feel like donating to me directly, as I said, I'll be using the profits to this to go to DuNord, a riot recovery fund. But if you want to, like, if you feel like supporting me personally, I'm not asking you to, but it always will be welcome. My Venmo is just moats, JUSTMOTZ, and it's the same at PayPal, JUSTMOTZ.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for joining. Thank you for your honest responses to these questions. Everyone stay tuned. Check out cincyfringe.com to look at the watch guide if you haven't done that yet. Keep watching shows so we can keep our numbers up. Keep coming to talkbacks and watching Fringe News. All of that great stuff can all be found on our Facebook and on our website. Thank you again to our wonderful knife slinging team, and I hope to speak with you soon. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.